I think we were really Taliban. So then you said,
Yes.
I heard people saying they were definitely more Taliban than they were up here. And it went on for longer.
Yeah.
We see your cases here are way up higher.
They are.
For 6 counties, for a smaller area.
Disproportionately.
You have a huge, your total cases per day are normally higher, you know. Which doesn't make sense, but
No,
that's
it
the way it
doesn't.
is.
I don't think it seems to figure out for
And it
us.
seems to be like that all the time from the start.
Yeah. Because the vaccination program had a sort of spurt here that it didn't really happen in the south at the beginning.
At the beginning, yeah.
But now it has been yesterday.
Do you ever get down south yourself?
Donegal, I like, but I haven't not since COVID.
But you wouldn't have been down to Wexford before?
No, but I go to college visit my niece. Lismore.
Oh, like Lismore down, that's more.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't be that far from Virginia. Sure wouldn't, Virginia.
Sorry, no.
Lismore is not that far from you.
No, not far at all, less than
Right. Katie, have the walkers returned yet? So I keep asking. I think we should, yeah, because some of the walkers are going to be here pretty
Oh, good.
Yeah.
They probably want to rest.
Oh, yeah.
Whereabouts in the village do you live yourself?
I live up, do you know where the Mass Rock is?
Yeah.
Up Glendon, when I live beside the Mass Rock. Yeah, but on the road, you know, it's the edge of a forest.
Yeah.
Your state advance party. Bring your walkers in. Okay.
Okay, later on.
Super, thank you.
Photographers in.
Yes, that's right. Great weather for the walk.
Surprising.
I know, because this morning was quite a heavy drizzle.
Yeah. Absolutely bucketed down, but I was driving down here yesterday. Up the south yesterday, came across some quite heavy rain.
Yeah, actually, because I think it moved up from the south.
Yeah.
Was it yesterday morning here? Was it right?
I don't mind, or I can walk to say it again.
Do you want to be happier here?
I don't mind.
I'll be better in here.
I think you should move over Virginia, yeah, because just in case there's any traffic.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to take this off. I can project. It's a great pity that COVID is still rampaging around, and I think that is kind of keeping people at bay, because people have been missing quite a treat. We're very lucky to have Virginia Brownlow, who's come up from North to read some poetry. Virginia is from a very literary dynasty. Her grandmother was Mara O'Neill, her mother was Molly Keane, and so it was natural that she grew up with kind of writing and with words absolutely kind of the oxygen of the household. And it was therefore inevitable, perhaps, that you started writing.
Yes.
About 12 years ago, Virginia set up a writer's retreat at the Molly Keane House. And I think I'm talking to Virginia that has really kind of inspired her writing to move up a level. So we're very lucky, as I said, that she's going to read us some of her poetry. And afterwards, there's going to be a discussion with James Morrow and David Screen, who's another member of the sort of Higginson dynasty, to discuss. Yes. So with no further ado, I'm introducing Virginia.
Thanks very much, Katie. I'm delighted to have been invited to take part in this event in Christendon, which is a place my mother, the writer Molly Keane, often spoke of in my childhood. She used to stay here in her childhood with her aunts, who were the poet Mara O'Neill's sisters. And I've arranged the poems I plan to read roughly in a biological order, beginning with my infancy and ending with the present. Poems aren't all strictly formal. Strictly factual, I mean. My father's a mystery to me. He died when I was 1, and I have no conscious memory of him. His death at 36 brought many changes into my mother, my sister, and my own life. This poem's called Out of Your Sunny Room. Out of your sunny room. You left, died, went away, made your wife, my mother, your lover, a widow. Never took a picture of me. Did you ever touch me? You must have looked at me, mustn't you? You never heard me talk, saw me walk. Did you ever speak to me? Before you died, I heard it was sunshine all day long, winter, spring, and summer. After you died, clouds grew thick and dark over your south-facing house. She moved to the back, out of your sunny room, away from floor to ceiling windows. Her widow's room had narrow windows over a north-facing shadowed yard. No more views over lawns to woods, or a river, or to mountains in the south. I masqueraded as my mother's sunbeam, climbed trees, rode ponies, splashed in rivers. We weren't normal. Other children had fathers in tweed jackets, dogs, horses, proper families. Now that I'm a mother and know more of what I missed, I'd like to hurl your river's rocks at your tweed jacketed back for going away and dying, for leaving me a woman who never knew a father. Not long after my father's death, my mother moved to Ardmore, which was a small fishing village in 1950, although it's changed dramatically since then. My parents' cook, Mary, moved with us from the Blackwater Valley. She must have been born at the end of the 19th century, and she was a very big part of my childhood. Never harm a spider. Her sore feet were always on the chapel road. St. Christopher, with a Christ child on his shoulder, heard many of her prayers for lost silver spoons and special knives. Whenever feet were mentioned, she raised blue eyes to heaven, to Jesus, Mary, and to Joseph. Razor blades had sliced her shoes, making room for angry corns. She danced on the bare boards of our new house to stop my tears on nights my widowed mother had gone out. Her floppy body stiff and still above fast jigging feet. When I grew calmer and her corns grew angrier, she opened her toothless mouth wide. A forest of whiskers twitched on her chin. She sang of banners, white, yellow, and green. One January morning, she raised her crossover apron and skirt, showed swollen knees, spoke of 3 years scrubbing stone convent floors on bare knees to atone for the sin of giving birth. Each half day off, she cycled away up mountain roads to see her blue-eyed, curly-headed, angry daughter, fostered with unforgiving holy people in a cold stone house. She forbade foxgloves, hawthorn, or scented yellow gorse inside the house. She'd never let us harm a spider, fearful of offending the old world, watching in the darkness. A world that watched and waited through her childhood, whispered around our home place that she'd never see again, disowned forever by her people, a disgrace. I've always been very interested in people, in stories of people from different worlds. The next poem's about someone I never forgot, the knife sharpener. There's a pink holiday cottage on a bend in the old road to the sea. Brambles on each bank reach high above your head. A Range Rover's parked outside that house, where Mikey Dunphy, Sunday contortionist and weekday knife grinder, once kept his ropes, knives, and sharpening wheel. Outside Mikey's well-kicked door, bits of broken bikes, spokes, and rusting handlebars poked through nettles among bottomless silver buckets. Mikey Dunphy escaped the pale hemp ropes that bound him every Sunday to some coppers in his greasy cap outside the chapel door. Bernie, the only child he knew for sure was his, was see-through thin and clever as her father. That cold spring day, she swallowed a needle her muddled mother dropped on their slimy kitchen floor. Mikey told us all he'd take his sharpest knife and run it through our heart if Bernie died. His huge wife, Bridie, wore a tight red coat and purple woolen headscarf. Mother of many sallow children, she leaned her vast bosom on the handlebars of a bicycle, wearily climbed home up Tower Hill as the sun set behind a tall round tower where Ardmore people hid from Viking raiders long ago. My mother was always very worried about lack of money throughout my childhood. When she had to go to London to work on her plays, I often stayed at my uncle's farm in County Wexford, David is now. See this one, The Playwright's Daughter. I was 1 year old when my nanny went away, leaving no memory of a face that watched, arms that held, hands that fed and cleaned me. Left no record of her voice or name. My father died, leaving wisps of pipe smoke for a memory. My mother went away to write in London, left me at her home place, Ballyrankin, a sheltered farm in the Slaney River Valley. I listened to stories from the crippled aunt, sitting among sleepy dogs next to the fire. Stacia cooked every day for the dining room, churned butter, gave sugared bread to me and her child Bernie, fed outside men in dirty boots and greasy caps in her stone-flagged kitchen that smelt of damp clothes, roasting meat and cake. I fished for minnows in Shalala stream under ash trees, where filtered sunlight made pools of silver water. On one side, horses grazed and swished their tails at flies. On the far side, cows rubbed their backs against low beech tree branches. My mother went away to hospital, left me with English neighbours. The Smith-Vigers' parents' hairy legs banged on passage floorboards. My bedroom filled with evening sun. They warned against crying. I cried louder. They took my pearl pink rosary beads, given to me by a monk from a mountain monastery. He told me Holy Mary answered children's prayers. A Protestant child, I didn't know the words, but I knew she'd hear me if I could catch the sunlight on her beads. I call the next poem Hunter-Gatherer. My mother was so much more than a well-known writer, she was always known as that, but I mean, she was a lot more. Her hands turned purple, gathering blackberries from thorny ditches each September. Jams and jellies brought late summer into tea-time winter evenings by the fire. She made marmalade every February, jars on a high shelf for a year of breakfasts. Creme caramel, carrageen and cream for dinner parties on moonless nights when waves crashed over storm walls in the village below her house. Hunter of words and stories, of desire, betrayal, and deception. The lovesick, lonely, and illustrious sat with her beside her fire. Gin and tonic in their hands, pretentious sycophants flinched backwards into her tapestry cushions from shrapnel drives. She brandished a wooden spoon, face flushed over boiling pots of blue-shelled mussels, picked off rocks by the estuary. Her kitchen smelt of garlic, wine, and bay leaves. She sent us to Youghal, 10 miles away, to buy saffron and cream for Moule Marinier, for dinner parties, and her visiting darlings. Mulching, digging, pruning, planting by day. She sat alone on winter evenings by the fire, David Austin and Sutton's catalogues on her knee, and on the floor around her feet, planning and scheming about spring shrubs for gaps. Mahonias for next winter, and more Rosa Albertine for summer scent. She walked pampered little dogs on beaches, yapping to send seagulls flying out to sea, while she gathered driftwood for her fire, seaweed for the roses and sea spinach leaves to fill white soup plates with bright green soup. She drove over mountains in her Morris Minor for cocktails with people who'd once been in the Bloomsbury set, and up long avenues by the Blackwater River Valley to Georgian houses, leaning over the dark river for poker games and dinner parties. She spent mornings in bed, hot water bottle at her back, dog at her feet, Ardmore outside her window. She stared at blank pages of school copybooks, maps of Ireland on the covers, biro in her hand. She hunted people, comedy and tragedy, for her books, read in London, Paris, and New York. I've been really amazed in recent years to see nettles for sale in markets. Good for the blood, the next poem's all about nettles. In late April, I go out with scissors and rubber gloves, pick fringed nettle leaves among buttercups and primroses. Birds sing in hazel trees around me. I fill my freezer with plastic bags of bright green soup for winter evenings. 5 feeds of nettles for the 5 children before May was out. That's what Bridie Sullivan used to say. Theirs was the last house on the mountain road. Ditches were deep and full of nettles. Children rubbed dock leaves on nettle stings until their legs turned green. Sun or rain each summer, thickets of nettles grow thick, grow tall, in every shadowy ruin along the famine road where the dead lay long ago, mouths stained green from eating nettles. Summer nettles stink of cat's piss. An old Shalala woman's knees swollen by rheumatism, fingers twisted, back bent, tore off her clothes, threw them in the stony road, rolled naked in snake-tongued nettles she'd heard would cure her pains. She died before she knew if that was true. My mother bought a house in London because I needed A-levels to get into a teacher training college. My sister planned to go to university. It wasn't a success. I took off. I wrote the next poem about the time I failed to get reasonable A-levels. Kissing. An underground train swerved violently around corners when we wound through tunnels under empty city streets, high above our teenage heads and bodies, chewing gum on greasy green and brown check seats stuck to my sandals. Doors opened at stations, pages of evening papers blew around our feet. I was oblivious to earthquakes on front pages, never to his blue jean thigh, touching my blue jean thigh. Earthquakes erupted in my chest, and his hand took my hand. That's what happened in books, in movies. Hand holding, then real kissing always started. I stared down at gum and papers, talked of nuclear war, left no space for kisses, craved for since our last half term, kept talking. He never asked me out again. I covered my head with pillows every night. Nobody heard my sobs, forgot about revision, walked out of the exam hall, left half-answered questions behind me. Saw him across the road, laughing, waving, calling. Before I stepped off the pavement, ran into his arms. I glanced back into the crowd behind me, saw her, her fringe, long blonde hair, long legs, her miniskirt. I knew she was a girl who never did much talking. However, I did qualify as a teacher eventually. Later on, I taught children from inner city London schools. Home tuition, and they were excluded from school. Home tuition and Chelsea Football Club is about one of my most memorable pupils. I called it Home Tuition and Chelsea Football Club. No school would take you, and you'd certainly take no school. Your parents left Connemara's harsh mountain sides, young and brave, on a mailboat to London, found drink, drugs, and new babies every year. You grew up in Paddington streets, frantic showman for some rare attention. You ran along the garden wall, jumped onto my neighbor's flowers. She sent threatening letters. And the dirty weeds that old car's on about. Your only love, your only thing was Chelsea Football Club. Each day you wrote hymns of devotion to those blue and whites. I loved them too. They kept you in your seat, focused passionately as any poet in a leafy glade. You told me every time it was the tops, the best A star I'd ever see. I never disagreed, searched for positive remarks. Each time our lessons ended before you went back to Paddington streets, you'd look me in the eye and say, Shit, innit? When I was teaching in a primary school, I met Kevin Brownlow, the man I married. I had wonderful experiences and happy years with him before our marriage failed. He's a film historian, specializing in silent cinema. After our wedding, we lived for some time in Los Angeles. LA 1969 is about my first experience of 60s California. In the 60s, America seemed far more foreign than it does now. I wouldn't drive those long American cars. Only VW Beetles made any sense to me. Beige and European from $1 a day rent-a-car. Shuddering on the wrong side of the road, we drove by oil fields to Havenhurst Lanai on Havenhurst and Sunset. Parked under palm trees beside banana plants, walked under arches to our apartment. We'd never seen a bigger fridge or double bed. Far away from London's February snow and slush, I sipped Coca-Cola, read Dickens in my new bikini by the pool. Out-of-work actors angled sun reflectors at their faces, chests and thighs. All their attention focused on their muscles. Languid boys stretched out beside them on blue wooden sunbeds. We stumbled into Schwab's pharmacy for breakfast, blind from Californian sun, thick carpets, dim light at midday, iced water and decisions, eggs easy over or sunny side up, hash browns or French fries, wholemeal or rye, bagel or bun. A waiter called Jesus asked if he could help us. You folksy called us, said we had cute accents. Shopping for aspirins on the way out, we gazed into a glass case of plastic penises, brown and white, batteries not included. The birth of our daughter had a powerful and wonderful impact on my life. Upon birth of my daughter, of a daughter. You were late, due at the beginning of November. You didn't arrive for 2 more whole weeks. Those weeks were dark outside. Indoors, I was alight with anticipation, fear close behind it. My vast belly filled with you, slowed my steps on wet, leafy pavements, as old age slows them now. Then my care was not to harm the future that I carried. Your father saw you first and fell in love. Before at last I held you in my arms and fell in love. The revelations began when you lay on my chest, before your cord was cut. That first time I heard your voice, I sobbed. A complete fellow human being had come out of me. Speak to her, they said. She knows your voice. I didn't know your voice. Later, we were alone together for the first time. For 9 months, we'd never been apart. Your birth was our first separation. Have a drink of water. She continues to be a major influence on me. This is shawls. My daughter Julia buys shawls in a Devon market in Totnes, far away from my home place, Ardmore by the sea. The labels say the shawls are made from Himalayan yak's wool. Long ago, a teenage Julia and I rode ponies high in the Ladakhi Himalayas, gazed across valleys at grazing yaks like moving mounds of rock, herded by Tibetan nomads with snow and wind-grooved faces. Sickened by the altitude, we couldn't drink the yak's butter tea that nomad women handed us on visits to their tents. Matup, our guide, had a pigtail reaching to his waist. He woke at 4 each morning for his daily meditation, sang us sad songs from Eastern Tibet, brought hot water bottles to our tent each evening, chanted, "Good morning, sir," when he handed us mugs of hot, sweet tea to drink inside our sleeping bags. It was the last adventure that Julia and I had together. She grew up, left home, and found her own adventures. I rode south, rode ponies over Ethiopian mountains, wrapped myself in my daughter's Himalayan shawls, sitting by campfires on chilly mountain evenings. Her shawls warmed me on meditation retreats at a Buddhist retreat center on the edge of West Cork cliffs, a journey begun when Matuk took us to a monastery to see a yawning boy on a golden throne, reincarnation of an illustrious tulku. I wrapped myself tightly in the green shawl. The night before the day I went to court to get divorced. Moth set many holes in the fine wool shawl I bought myself in the Kulu Valley on the way to the high Himalayas. I threw it in a London dustbin before I left forever. I've worn my yak's wool shawls for 100 different picnics on windy Irish beaches, convalescing from operations to cut cancer from my jaw and breast. One Christmas, she gave me a blue and green shawl. Flower and leaf prints climb across it. Wrapped in that shawl, I become a stylish woman. On frosty winter mornings, I wrap myself tightly in my grass green shawl. I want them to bury me in my blue, my flowery, my green, and my first brown shawl, given to me by my child Julia. I found my experiences with projects in East Africa very inspiring and enriching. A bag is about Ethiopia, a country I love. It's a memory of a man I met when I was volunteering in Addis Ababa. A bag. My Rasta bag has red and green and yellow stripes. Haile Selassie's proud Ethiopian colors, sun-powered, foreign colors in an alien Irish rain. 10 years old, full of chocolate, books, spectacles, pills, poems, and a bruised banana. Bought from a man in a wheelchair in Addis Ababa, a countryman, thick-muscled arms and chest, and useless legs blown to bits by landmines on a border. Rescued from crawling along mountain tracks, brought south to blue and white robed nuns in a crowded city sanctuary. Thick fingers that used to dig, to sew, to harness disobedient mules to plows and harrows. Now roll up green, red, and yellow wool in balls. Crochet bags and blankets. Pray every night, morning and midday. White volunteers pay him a few Ethiopian birr for bags, delighted by exotic bargains for birthday gifts at home. This next poem, We Bought the Sofa from Two Sad Divorcing Doctors, is a poem about the way that objects hold memory. The old road along the glen has a green spine down the middle. March sun filters through hazel's bare branches. In a ditch, dandelions blaze yellow, celandines shine. I look over a crumbling wall at rushing water below. There's a leather sofa wedged against an ash tree's pale trunk. A cashmere rug of green moss grows over both arms. Dead brown beech leaves cover 3 fat seat cushions. Once there was a green sofa far away in a London mansion flat. A solid piece of furniture for our new flat, new love. Small green buttons all along the arms and back. We sat together there for mugs of tea, toast and honey, a wild loving, clothes thrown over bare floorboards. A place for convalescence after operations, on my jaw, my hip, my knee, my breast. The evening sun came through bow windows on my face. Evening sun warmed the back of my head. Some angry silences when we sat at opposite ends of the sofa. Whiskey with women friends, talk of lovers and of mothers. Home from hospital, my newborn baby Julia in my arms. I sank down onto the sofa, gave our daughter my breast. Her father sat on the sofa, Julia on his knee, watched shadows of parents, cousins, aunts and uncles cross her weak old face. Soon she listened to stories, picked off green buttons, organized dolls and teddy bears, laughed, cried, stood on her head on that sofa. We read the Sunday papers, bellies full of roast lamb and crumble, laughed, dozed, made plans, watched movies side by side. Our child grew up and went away. We spent less time together on the sofa, sprayed toxic chemicals to kill moths, nesting inside its soft green velvet. Next three poems are examples of the way that writing has been a gift to me in coping with very, very painful events in my life. I made porridge every morning. Thought that's what good wives did. Heard that it lowered bad cholesterol. No lumps in your blue bowl of porridge. Every February I made marmalade, sliced, chopped, worried about the set. You spread it on your toast each morning. At 4 o'clock every evening with a mug of Indian tea. On Sunday evenings I ironed your shirts, pressed trousers and jackets, roasted joints of lamb. I wanted you to want my body, but you wanted it no more than porridge, preferring muesli, supermarket's own brand marmalade, and youthful foreign flesh. And the next one is called Divorce. I was very lucky to have my mother's house in Ardmore to go and live in, where I live now, and it suits me much better than city life. We lie in each other's arms, watch raindrops on new leaves, summer rain sliding over lime tree flowers. Close together, we'd watch red and yellow leaves fly past our window in December, wind and rain. I left bare January branches without hope of watching any more spring leaves with you. Hurried back to Ardmore, my family's seaside home. On a wild November day at Ballyquin Strand, seagulls whirled above the waves, claw prints left indecipherable volumes on the sand. I splashed through waves on numb feet, cold hands deep in pockets of damp tissues, head aflame with thoughts of you. In my garden this autumn, thoughts rampage. Attack you, attack me, attack her, blind me to the milky blue of the last agapanthus lily left standing, to the stippled blues and pinks of fading clematis saucers twining through withered roses. Words of yours, of hers, of mine, deafen me to jackdaws' conversations on the chimney pots, to murmuring sea, to pigeons in my still autumnal garden. Under ruined Temple Michael. Should we bury it on the cliffs we walked each New Year's Eve at midnight? Or the park where we pushed our daughter's pram, watched her learn to walk, feed ducks, climb trees? Should it be on Sunset or on Hollywood Boulevard, where movie pioneers mixed memories with martinis? Ballysaggart Woods, smell of leaf mold, sausages cooking in our blackened camping pan, on twig fires, a slow stream under beech trees. Or under ruined Temple Michael by the Slaney Estuary, drinking coffee from a flask, without a notion that love could ever be a corpse in need of burial. Ardmore's full of memories for me. As a child, I didn't really feel part of the community. I didn't go to any school until I was 12, and that school was in England. This is called I Moved to the Far Side of the Bar. Finn's blue hands pulled pale sugar beet from mud in cold cliff fields for many months a year. At times it snowed, often it rained. Sea winds raved, sometimes rippled, dark green sugar beet leaves. He scowled. We were 14 years old, his thin lips tight, his white face clenched against cold, clips round the ear, hard words. His father's tweed jacket, frayed at the cuffs, hung over the top of his Wellington boots. Tough man, they said of his father. Hard as nails, that man. I skirted around his father's fields, searched for early primroses on south-facing banks, carried my yapping dog out of the mud, gazed out to sea, pretended I didn't see Finn. Yesterday, I saw him for the first time in 50 years, sitting lopsided on a bar stool in Anshanachie, his pinched boy's face flabby from years of whiskey drinking next to warm pub fires. I seem to have not included a whole batch of poems. Well, the last 2 or 3. I can understand that. Oh no, I haven't. I found them. There are many reasons why I love living in Ardmore. Fishing Friend is about an old Ardmore friend who I've known all my life. Gallagher came down my steps on a darkening August evening, in need of hot whiskey, lemon, sugar, and many cloves. A jaunty sailor's cap on his bald head, long nailed toes in sandals, warm embrace. He carried a faded Queen's supermarket bag that bulged with 2 blue lobsters, fresh from lobster pot, and seaweed curtained hollows under rocks. Angry claws clamped by red rubber bands. Moving antennae interrogated my smiling, greedy face. Brave and warmed by whiskey, I dropped the biggest into a cauldron of boiling water, poked Ray's claws with spoons, and looked away. Saw his expression. He knew I couldn't watch those questioning antennae turn from blue-black to red, but I was glad lobsters had no voice that any human ear can hear. We drank more whiskey. He went home to hungry dog and fire, left me with memories of a wild river salmon he once brought. A small child's size and weight wrapped in newspaper, silver scales and dead blind eyes. He slit the silver belly, left liver and guts in the sink, scraped away silver scales. My fish kettle fitted the salmon, as close as any human coffin. My mother died one spring. That first Christmas Eve, he brought shrimps from pots he'd pulled in Curragh Cove. Translucent brown bodies twitched under seaweed blankets. We sat close to the fire, curtains drawn against wind, rain, and ghosts. Peeled pink boiled shrimps, threw shells into the fire, drank tea and whiskey. Butter melted over our fingers as we swallowed shrimps on bread. The writing workshops that I run with my friend Lanny O'Hanlon motivated me to take my writing seriously. Lanny's been a major influence on my writing, as well as Thomas McCarthy and other gifted guest poets who facilitated workshops for us. COVID pushed us online, but surely COVID can't last forever. I found the restrictions benefited my writing. I ran out of excuses to avoid writing. I can't wait to see the end of COVID-19. 6 Dublin people sneaked into our village at 2 a.m. last night. You sit under the bay tree where you've always sat, steam rising from your mug of tea. Swear at the blackbird who rushes ahead of your favorite robin, yellow beak leading, a miniature Groucho Marx in a hurry for buttery toast crusts. The longer you self-isolate, the tamer and bolder birds become. Birds do social gathering, don't bother with social distancing. You bounce blueberries across the paving stones for Groucho. Easter in 2 days' time, postcard blue sky. No wisp of cloud. Only 2 cars in the beach car park. COVID-19 has sent Ardmore bouncing back to 1956. 1 shop, 2 pubs, 8 cars, and Jim Quain's van. No HVGs, jackhammers, pneumatic drills. No handshake, hug, or kiss. Get out of the way, back away, Zoom me, ring me, Skype me, stop me disappearing. Sounds of sea, of bees, of pigeon calls through conifers. You listen to any sound that passes on the road below your garden. You may recognize a voice, a car, a child. Plant out last year's skeletal geraniums. No new plants this coronavirus Easter of spring's solitary confinement. You must go in, light the fire, watch flames through driftwood from Ballyquin Strand flare into James E. Sullivan's dry sycamore logs and Michael John O'Neill's black Polish coal from York. All you ever thought you wanted was this peace and quiet. You never knew the comfort to be had from concrete mixers. Thank you very much for listening to my poems. Many, many thanks to the Cushion Dun Committee for inviting me to this event. And I'd be really interested to know, if there were any poems you found yourself responding to.
Thank you, Virginia. And you certainly find a very compelling voice, if I may say so. I'm going to start with a few fairly sort of factual questions in the hope that those might lead us deeper towards the wellsprings of your poems. Right, so some of these questions have, of course, been answered in the poems themselves. Which poets influenced you, and which do you like reading?
Oh, well, Yeats, Seamus Heaney.
Okay.
Who do I love? I love Paula Meehan. Loads. Yeah.
And have you experimented with any other forms of writing, storytelling or drama?
Well, I used to kind of write, because I wrote journals on my travels always.
Mhm, mhm,
I'd like to get poems out of,
Mhm.
on winter evenings.
mhm. What prompts the poets? Is it something in the outside world? I mean, they all chart this ceaseless movement between the inner and the outer worlds. Your own interior world, and then the natural world, social, and of course, it's a very large outer world that you inhabit, and it's a large inner world as well. So what prompts the poems?
I suppose emotion, when I'm moved by people,
Mhm,
by the natural world, by memories, and people that are very close to me, like my daughter,
mhm.
my ex-husband,
Yes,
my
yes, yes.
mother, people I've loved and people I've not loved at all.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah.
I like the way that you seem to be able to move yourself back in time to tap into the emotions of what life was like when you were growing up and so on, and it seemed that you were able to express them in a way that was totally convincing that
Good.
it was how you felt at that time.
Well, I am quite surprised that it's I can go back in time very vividly in my head.
I mean, that one of the words, actually, you say vivid, and one of the words I wrote down, the whole thing just struck me was the visual impact that the poems have, because everything was to do with imagery. And I mean, I'm sitting there looking at you reading them, but I mean, I'm with you in terms of what you're describing, that you can see, so.
Yeah, because that's one of the big themes, objects become a kind of repository for memory. And there's this constant interweaving also of the past and present. The past is brought into the present.
I think it's quite a lot to do with the fact that I'm in Ardmore, where my early life began. And so that prompts a lot of memory, and the juxtaposition of contrast between now and 1950s.
There's a lot of pain in the poems, Virginia. Of course, this is really a big question, but there's a lot of savagery and anger as well, even from the first poem about your father's death. It's a bit like McNeece's autobiography. When I was 5, the black dreams came about the early death of his mother. Well, how could you even come close to describing the balances that your work achieves between happiness and unhappiness? Because the natural world obviously brings you a great deal of solace. So that does one play against the other, this kind of tormented, sometimes inner world, and then the solace of the concrete things that, as James says, you evoke in sort of these concrete, sensuous images.
So really you're asking me, where do I find comfort? Well, friends.
Yeah.
And certainly the natural world, the fire. I don't know. Well, I've not been very articulate about it, but many things fill me with joy.
Yes.
Or maybe the selection that didn't come over so strongly.
No, it did. There is a lot of just delight and pleasure.
It's just pain is such a marvelous stimulus for writing.
Sure.
In difficult situations.
Yeah, of course.
And conflict.
Yeah. And did you find that the act of writing the poems imposed a kind of form on the chaos of experience? Yeah.
Very much. It was very helpful.
Yeah.
Very therapeutic, I guess, to try and make something creative about something that would be the opposite. Right, let's see. You were talking before the reading about the kind of steeliness or stale even that there is in writers, despite reputation they acquire being a very sensitive breed, and kind of exquisitely sensitive. But you want to say that that's tempered by this kind of iron on the soul. I know many writers don't like when I say that, but I mean, God knows I grew up with writers.
Mhm.
And I mean, really good writing does go to the bones of things, and life isn't all touchy-feely, sweet, easy. It's
Sure.
full of pain
Yeah, yeah,
for everyone.
yeah. And where does the steel come from in the writer then? Sort of this kind
I
of
think trying to
learned
look at-
resistance to the pain. Or,
I think trying to look at what's true,
yeah.
good or bad.
Yes. Yeah.
I think I do try to do that.
Yeah. And is there any kind of connection there with your Buddhism? You mentioned the practice of Buddhism and its importance in your life and how you find your way to it.
Well, I guess, yes, it's being present
Mhm.
in permanence
Mhm.
and being present.
Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of things. And being present with joy or being present with pain, or
Yeah.
and also, I suppose, how you relate to people, to relate to people with respect and whoever and however they may annoy you.
Tell us a bit about your position within society. I mean, there's a big awareness of the different, this kind of highly stratified society that you lived in growing up. The poems about the cook and the ordinary people, and then this kind of Anglo-Irish privileged, economically and socially privileged stratum. That has shaped quite a number of your poems.
So, but it was a huge thing not going to school. And I mean, while growing up in the 1950s, it wasn't. Ireland was a very new country. And I always, I don't know, I was always very, very wanting to be part of the community. Even when I was 6 years old, I'd run away down in the early morning to where the fishermen were doing their boats and people around horses, and that was my glamour. And that I loved.
Yeah, it's funny. That's what I felt about your mother reading Sally's book. That this was somebody who was on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
Sometimes looking longingly in.
Yes.
Is that how you would see yourself?
I don't feel it nearly so acutely now, but I certainly did.
Yes. Yeah. And do you think that was a kind of prompt for a lot of the poems, that sense of alienation?
I think so.
Being a kind of misfit. I mean, I suspect a lot of poets feel themselves to be misfits.
Because that's what they should done right.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I noticed, and I know that you said that there's no discernible influence from the Moira O'Neill poems in your poems. But one thing that did strike me, just what you're saying there about having the kind of privileged background and so on, and she would have had the same thing, but yet a lot of the poems that she wrote were about, if you like, the ordinary people and so on. And it was something that I noticed in things that you had written about the knife sharpener and so on, that there was the connection that you had with the ordinary people in the village, not the people in the big house or the grand
exactly.
house. So
it was so that was okay. Well, that's where I wanted to be connected. But the natural world too. I mean, Moira O'Neill did love the natural world, didn't she?
Yeah.
And it's hugely important to me.
Yeah. And I mean, I haven't been to Ardmore. I've only looked at photographs of it and so on. But I mean, I see quite a remarkable parallel with Cushendun.
It was, but now it's getting so developed.
Well,
a 5-star hotel, and that's brought all sorts with it.
And it kind of, and particularly in the last poem about COVID, the way that you were describing the absence of people and the absence of sound and so on was, I think, pretty much how it was here as well.
I bet, yeah.
With police cars coming down to chase people and people being chased out of shops for coming from too far away and things like that. So I just find that very interesting, the kind of parallel between the two places that are at opposite ends of the island.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of similarities, I'm sure, even though a lot of differences too.
Mm-hmm.
Were you very conscious of the possibility of offending members of your family and friends?
Yeah,
in your
hugely.
writing? Yeah. And how did you cope with that?
I don't know, you really have to balance the ruthlessness and think, well, do I value that friendship? But actually the one about the friend Tony Gallagher who bought fish, Sally said to me, oh, can't you say something nice about Tony rather than talking about he's got awful toenails, Tony. He wears sandals. And I just didn't want that because I didn't want to be romantic. And I did say to Tony, look, your friendship means more to me than this poem. Are you okay with it? He said, of course I am.
But do you think that, there are some stories that have to remain untold? I know from Sally's book that you've been very interested in presenting yourself as a subject for psychotherapy throughout a lot of years. What are your feelings about that? I mean, should every story be told? Should that kind of ultimate therapy be available to us? Or is there a kind of reticence that ought to govern the stories we tell?
Well, obviously not with your therapist, but in the world, yes.
Yeah.
To be trying to make something clever and impressive out in the world at the expense of someone.
Yes.
I don't want to do that. Can be tempting.
Yeah.
If you care about the person.
And do you think your practice in psychotherapy, that kind of guided excavation of the self, fed into your writing?
Well, again, it's just a question, I suppose, like, not unlike the Buddhism, that just trying to look at what's true and not phony.
Yeah.
I think basically that's what damn difficult journey it can be.
Yeah. And this journey that continues, of course, because you haven't finished writing. Tell us where you're going now. What direction would you like the future to take for you with your work?
Well, I really want to get my collection published, which is more or less there. And I've been chased by a poetry editor of Penguin, but then I don't know, with COVID, there's been an incredibly long pause, and I've got to kind of contact him and see what's going on. But that is, I've always reminded of our aunt. David's my old aunt, mum's older sister. She was never married. And I went to see John, our cousin, and he was cleaning, he was very close to her, and he was cleaning out her house. And none of us knew this, but I mean, there was just manuscript after manuscript, plays, novels, poems, and they were in plastic bags going to the skip. And it's haunted me forever. I thought, I'm determined my work's not going to, because I want to throw this stuff around in plastic bags. It's not going to end up like Aunt Sue's on the skip.
So you want to kind of push out to a wider audience?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. We grew up with writers, and, kind of successful writers. And Kevin, my ex-husband, was big shot in his world, and Mum, and Sally. So, yeah. Which is a drawback in a way, because I feel more picky about going to some small publisher.
Let's hope we can approach everything. They've approached it. Yeah. Good. David, maybe could we bring you into the discussion? Yes.
Well, David, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong in this, and say to everybody that David lives in Ballyrankin House, which has been the family house where the Screens lived since the early, well, over 100 years.
Yes.
Since Nesta, who was Moira O'Neill, and Walter, her husband, came back from ranching in Canada. If you could maybe explain what you know of how they came to settle there, and
well, on the Canada front, I'm not actually sure the main reason for selling the ranch in Canada, the Bar S ranch. I never could find that out for sure. but they came back and they lived up, I think, in Kildare for a short while. And then they bought Ballyrankin, where I am now, in 1910. And my uncle is a very good farmer always. He was very interested in cattle, particularly. Well, he had a lot of cattle in Canada, of course. It was a huge ranch. And the people that now have that ranch still keep in contact with us. And but he farmed there. And as I say, he came to Ballyrankin in 1910. And in 1922, their house, Ballyrankin House, got burnt. And that was the Black and Tans at that time. And so within about a year, another residence came up for sale adjoining Ballyrankin. And it was about 30 acres of land with that. And my grandfather bought that and just amalgamated it all into one lot. And then he lived there till my father, eventually when he died, my father took over that, and my mum lived there. And now at the present time, that property, my mum died about 4 years ago, and she left that to my sister. It's at the last, she's in the photograph there, yeah. And she lives in Kent, England, and she sold it, plus it sat on about 20 acres. She sold that. So that's now in possession of somebody else. But they're quite good neighbours to me, the new people. They're actually funny enough from Kent, from where my sister lived. They moved to Ballyrankin and then to that house. Newlands House was the name of that house. So on the farm where I am now, there's just over 200 acres. And 25 years ago, roughly, I built a new house on the land there when I got, just after I got married. And because the house, we lived in a little small house in the farmyard, but that was very dilapidated and very small. So we now live in the newer house, and I have a daughter who's 28, and she's with us. She's a full-time nurse up in Dublin, and has an interest in the farm as well. So she's up and running and into everything, you know. That at 28, you're lively enough, likes fast cars and such things. So she's with us there. So that's, and I do mostly, it's arable farming I do. Now I did have cattle and sheep at one stage for a number of years, but because I'm on my own, it was a huge workload for one person. And my daughter was too young to help with them when she was only in school. So I kind of got out of the sheep and stayed with a few cows and calves, such things, and stuck with the arable. So now at the moment I just do arable. And that's where I'm at the moment. That's the way I'm set up at the moment, you know. I'm sorry I haven't more to say on my grandfather's farms in Canada, because I just haven't enough knowledge on to talk on, you know.
Well, I'm interested. Would you say that you're in a modern house now?
Yes, I built a new house.
And is Nestle and Walter's house is still still there? Is it
the ruin of the old house is still there? And about 3 or 4 years ago, it was like it has never got, the ruin has never got worse, as in falling down in my lifetime. I'm now 60, so it's never got any worse from my childhood. But it was just around the room that was gone wild with brambles and nettles and such like. So I cleaned it up there 3 or 4 years ago, and I stoned it all around it. So you can walk around it now and take photographs and such things. And since Sally has written her recent book, I've had a few phone calls and a few callers of interest to see about the old house. So it's coming back into itself. You know?
Yeah.
So it's nice to keep it in the history. There's a bit of history. You know, yeah.
And it was the Black and Tans that were responsible for burning it.
It was. My grandfather, my grandfather was actually, and grandmother were in the house just to have their meal in the evening time.
But the Tans didn't burn it, did they?
They did. Yeah,
Why?
that's what I was always
I
told.
thought it was the
Well,
Civil War.
My grandmother was a little bit outspoken coming from here, and it didn't go down that well down south. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And they had a bit of a grudge. Now, my grandfather was very popular and very well liked in the area, and people were very annoyed, the neighbours were very annoyed when it got burnt, as to it getting burnt. But I always understood that my grandmother was just a bit too, she should have been a bit quieter about everything. You know, she was a little bit outspoken.
Yeah.
And that was possibly the main cause. And just after that, then all the burning stopped. There were other houses in the area to be burnt, and they didn't get they initially low like after all that came to a halt, and that old kind of war thing was over, and there was no more burnings after that. So it's unfortunate that it happened.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's an account that she wrote in Blackwoods magazine in 1916, that was an account of the rebellion in Wexford, which she kind of describes the Sinn Féiners going on the rampage and burning houses and so on. And they were essentially the next ones to be burnt.
Yes.
But they weren't burnt.
They weren't burnt. Yes.
And then so 1921 ended up with the Black and Tans burning the house instead. And
It's pretty unusual, isn't it? That the Tans burnt the house.
I'm puzzled by
That's
that.
not right.
Well, I was always
You
told
thought it was
that-
with your grandparents.
Yes.
How was the Tansbury?
Yeah.
Well, unless I was misinformed on it, I was always led to believe from the time I was a child that they were the main culprits to it, you know.
they're
I heard that they burnt that they burnt a cottage on the mountain, and it was a retaliation.
Yes, there was something to do with the retaliation. But some of the people that were involved in the burning were from not that far away. People that my grandfather would have known of, you know, were involved. That's now, as I say, it's all, I mean, I was only a child when I was told all this, so it's all, what I'm saying is just what I was told.
there's a number of other articles that I think she wrote, but are written under the pseudonym of Southern Loyalist, which are incredibly patriotic and incredibly British and very firmly anti-Republican.
It's a huge provocation.
Yeah.
A big provocation.
I mean, her anger in them is palpable about the political situation of the time and so on. But that's probably for
Very interesting.
another day.
Yeah. That's as much as I can tell you on the situation on that.
David, just a subject, do you write?
Do I write? No. I'll letter if I have to.
And how do you respond to Virginia's writing?
Well,
Had you read the poems before? Or?
No, I never heard those poems till today.
My goodness, right?
But I was very taken aback by them and impressed with them. Because to me, they're all very true of Virginia and her relationship with her daughter.
Yes.
And her mother and all that. That whole, to me, was very much in line with the way I'd be thinking myself, having known her for so many years. I'd be very much in agreement with her poems. I know at the start there was a bit with her mum, as you said, it was or with her dad, losing her dad. It was a bitter kind of experience, wasn't it?
Yes.
She said, like, you know, but I can see why. I mean, I lost my own father at 5, but I never was bitter about it, but I was always very sad about it. And I felt that I missed out on a lot, having lost him. So, yeah. And Virginia had mentioned him in the poems, was staying, you mentioned when you were talking about staying with him, that was her uncle on the farm. And
In that poem,
and you know, she was obviously very close to him.
Yeah,
And
I just loved
he was very good. She was as a niece. Yeah. Good to your mum as well when she
Very, yeah.
lost her husband, I'd
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah.
It's interesting actually that your cousin John, I mean, I presume you both know he writes poems. And
I
so-
knew just a good some of them.
Very good.
I
yes.
know, and I was thrilled.
And very, very much a firm interest in family and ancestry.
Yeah.
In those.
Mm.
And one in particular that is about a tree, and I've forgotten what kind of.
Oh, well, it's the yew tree at Old Ballyrankin. It was a huge part of all our childhoods.
That's
It's a
over
very,
1,000.
very ancient.
It's well over 1,000 years old.
Right.
And because I warned the man that now owns Newlands House, which is where my grandfather fought when the house got burned. And that's where the yew tree is. But I did warn him not to cut bits out of it or do anything with it, because so that tree is a preserved tree. So he has, and he's keeping it as I told him anyway. He's doing what I said. So, but my mum never really wanted people to come and look at it too much, because she was living there on her own as a widow, and she didn't want too many people just coming down the avenue and nosing around. I mean, she would show it to friends and show it to somebody rang her and particularly wanted to see it. She would, but she didn't want to open it up as a kind of a place for everyone to come and look.
Would anybody else like to contribute to the discussion?
I just want to thank you for your life and you describe as bravery. Your bravery and being so honest and frank about difficult points and times, and also very joyous times of your life. And I immediately thought, so it's interesting that you mentioned your influences were Seamus Heaney, because there's a similarity for me when I hear you talk to blackberry picking.
Oh, wow, that's some compliment.
Hunter-gatherer. I mean, all I want to say is your work published. I just said that to the family that came in there. You know, it's just, I am so moved. I have no idea of your talent. I don't mean to start, like, I'm saying that to you. I don't have, my literary skills are extremely limited, I would say, but I am absolutely blown away
Oh, Jude.
by your poetry and how you read it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just so emotive. And I never thought of having a child, the way you described the 9 months connection and then suddenly the disconnection. And that's so powerful. You have a way of explaining and understanding things in such an articulate way. So thank
Oh,
you.
I'm so pleased you
I'm
felt
looking
like
forward to
that.
seeing your work published.
I thought you actually structured the reading very well, going from, you know, taking the autobiographical approach to it. And
It seems sort of straightforward thing to do.
yeah, well, I always go for the simplest, you know. But you know, to manage to bring it right up to date with COVID-19 and the reason we're all sitting here with masks and we're sitting in empty rooms with doors open and things like that, you know.
Yeah.
Just goes to show that the whole thing is a continual process, and it's, you know, the next poem you write will be about your Saturday afternoon at Cushendon.
I better be careful what I say.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I want to get back to writing, you know, new writing, because I've been fussing over my collection for a few months, trying to get it right.
I haven't lived in Cork.
What?
But I used to live in Cork, near West Cork. I lived beside Kinsale,
Uh-huh.
so I used to work in Youghal.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so it's really interesting to hear you talk about that coastline.
Ah.
But as James was saying, you have a way of describing things. I felt like I was actually being able to see things through your eyes.
Ah.
It's very powerful.
Oh.
So I'm very extremely brave. I'm inspired by you, really inspired by you.
Oh.
But I'd like to thank you all as well for inviting us to done for the second time,
Yep.
and you're all great hosts, and you make us feel so welcome, and it's just such a pleasure to be here. And I'd like you all just to know that.
Pleasure is entirely ours. Yes.
Well, I think I'll just, in that case, just thank you both very much for coming up. And thank you, Virginia, so much for sharing those poems, which are really quite profound and very precise. They're very true, I think is the word you use. So thank you very much. And we just look forward to when they are published, and you'll let us know, I hope. I think William has recorded this, and he'll probably send you a recording.
Oh, great.
That, so you'll have that, and we'll discuss if we can put that up on our website and things. But just once again, I'd like to thank Virginia and also David for this afternoon. And that is the last of today's events. I think tomorrow we've just got the book fair, and then next weekend Culture Month continues. And as I think everybody knows what's on the programme for next weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can see through them.